Hello everyone and welcome to the latest This Week in the Field with the Handyman in the Field. I'm Dustin and today we are going to be discussing the past week of work. To start off, we're going to take a little bit behind the scenes situation. So when I started the show, I had 2 weeks of content completely recorded. I've mentioned this before, but I want to clarify this because we're going to get to a point here very soon where it'll start making sense. But there's something that happens in this specific week that I'm talking about that it won't make sense unless I explain it. So when I started the YouTube channel, I had 2 weeks of content pre-recorded. I basically just wanted to make sure that I had stuff recorded, mostly so that I could make sure that I had enough time to edit it and things like that, but also give myself a little bit of a buffer. And there's a second reason behind that, which is there was a couple of vacations that I had at various points here in the spring. Most of my vacations I tried to do in the spring. My 2 boys and my daughter all play some version of football, either tackle or flag. And the fall is not a great time for me to be taking vacations. So my wife and I typically front load our vacations earlier in the year, so that it doesn't conflict with any of the situations that we have with the football schedules in the fall. That said, I still do go out of town a couple of times in the fall, but it's specifically like just for the weekend kind of thing where it wouldn't affect a work week. That said, I've already had 2 vacations that have eaten up some of that, extra content that I had. One was with the entire family, and then the other one was with my wife just a couple weeks ago. I have 1 additional week between now and the fall that will also affect what we have here at the YouTube channel, which is the end of June going into the 4th of July. I'm going out of town for the first half of the week with my son to Washington, D.C. For the America 250 celebration. And then at the end of the week, we're coming back and meeting up with my wife and the other 2 kids to actually spend 4th of July all together out of town. So that entire week, I won't have any work to discuss. Now, I have some ideas of some stuff that I'm going to try to do for that week, because at this point, the stuff that you're listening, you're only about a week behind when it comes to content. But that said, I want to make sure that I still have a little bit of a buffer so that way we can keep getting the videos out on time. That said, so here's the reveal behind the scenes that I was referring to. This specific week that we're talking about is the week of Memorial Day. So while you're watching this, you're like 2 weeks out, but the reality is that I have to obviously record the video at the end of the week after it's complete. So you're only really about 1 week behind at this point. It's very difficult to obviously have my oldest son. He actually edits the videos for me. I just don't have the time to edit videos. He does a great job of doing the pictures up here and stuff like that. That's all him. I have very little input when it comes to it. I just record the stuff and he edits it. That said, the issue is that if I have to work on a Saturday, which has happened multiple Saturdays in a row, and we have to record, edit, and then still get it posted by Monday, it becomes rather difficult, mostly just because there's just stuff that comes up. I have other things outside of this. I'm involved with my church. I volunteer, things like that I also, it's also just part of my schedule. So it's very difficult sometimes for me to have this recorded and then have him be able to have the time to be able to edit it all within potentially a 24-hour window. So that said, when we get to the final week of June and I don't have any work, I might just have, some other type of content that I've been tossing around to release during that week that wouldn't necessarily be linked to this specific feed for those of you who are listening to this in podcast form, or necessarily any of the playlists on the website. So that all said, just wanted to give you a kind of a peek behind how I have planned things. But the whole idea is that I had 2 weeks ahead. Those 2 vacations I already took, they ate up those 2 weeks. And now I'm kind of like, we're just about 1 week behind, which is what we really need to be in order to make sure that everything has enough time to get edited. All right. So with that said, let's dive into this week. So this week was the week of Memorial Day, and I'll start referencing actual times going forward. I didn't do that for a while just because as I was getting established, I didn't really want to make it seem like this is 3 weeks old, even though it was. But now I think we've built enough, I've built enough episodes up where I think I can reveal that and no one's going to get upset about it. But I also think that having that time frame is actually a decent way of clocking certain things. If you see an uptick in estimates or you see an uptick in business, it's good to know if that was, what month that was in, what week that was in, things like that. Is it the middle of the month? Do you see an uptick immediately after, taxes or tax season, things like that. So going forward, I'll tell you what week it is. But this was the week of Memorial Day. So the last video that this week in the field that we did, we were talking about basically catching up after vacation. I had a lot of stuff. I had 7 days in a row that I was working, trying to get stuff done. It's not so much that I was behind. It was more of I always have this mentality that, if I go on vacation, I need to either have something really big beforehand or really something really big afterwards in order to not feel like I wasted my time, not wasted my time, but I took a vacation and lost money. The reality is that's not really how it works because one, I pay myself a flat amount based off of how much money we have coming in. That's built into my overhead. I do not have a scenario where that money is, I just have to make sure I have that much money to be able to pay myself, which I do. I haven't had that issue in 3+ years of being, not being able to float, or not float, but to be able to cover that overhead expense of my salary. That said, that's still in my mind, it's just like a weird, thing that I have where it's like, if I know I'm not going to be working, I need to make sure that I have money coming in on that week, even though I'm not around. In the future, if I have techs, they still go out, they still do things. And if that happens, then obviously money's still coming in. But it's harder when you're an owner operator, especially wrapping your head around no money's coming in and you've got a business that continuously has expenses and things like that. So that said, I've worked a lot of Saturdays recently. So we talked about last Saturday. Sunday, I had off. I did not actually have any work on Sunday, but I did have a variety of things I was trying to catch up on, and a lot of stuff around my own house that I was trying to do that had been neglected for a while. Monday, my intention for Monday was the entire day I was going to spend some time catching up on admin stuff because I was not planning on scheduling anything for Memorial Day. However, I had a customer from a couple weeks ago. Obviously I talked about this, but a couple weeks ago, customer prepping his house for sale. There's a variety of different things. One of them was replacing a faucet. There was a wall that needed to be painted. There was a fixture that needed to be fixed. Well, there was an issue that arose with the fixture in the bathroom that I guess fixed. I didn't fix it, and I didn't actually end up charging him for it either, just because there really wasn't anything involved in it. But what happened was the light bar was initially improperly mounted on top of a mirror, directly on top of a mirror. The electrician, so the person who put up the mirror drilled the hole for the electrical box, but they did not drill any holes for the screws. So the thing is, the light bar, which goes across, had nothing to mount onto. So what their bright idea was to use double-sided tape. The problem is that double-sided tape from 20, 30 years ago, that tape has a tendency to, obviously deteriorate and not last. I'd sit here and say that the double-sided tape that we have now is going to be so much better. I don't know what's going to happen in 30 years. It might not work in 30 years. You don't know. But the whole idea was I was supposed to just get this thing reattached. Well, while I was trying to get it out of place in order to scrape off the old tape, I found there was 2 different types of tape back there. And one of them was actually it was still sticky. So all I did was just wiggle it back and push it back in place. And that was the extent of what I did. I told him that's all I did. And like I said, I didn't even charge him for that aspect of the job because it wasn't as complicated as I thought, which was scrape all the stuff off and then obviously put new tape down. Well, what ended up happening was right after I was there, he was out of town for 2 weeks. The house got put on the market. The realtor had a couple of showings. And when he came back into town, he noticed that the light had fallen again. So he called on Saturday, got a hold of the receptionist, left a message. Sunday, he called the receptionist. I don't have the receptionist pick up calls on Sunday, so it just goes to voicemail. He left a voicemail. And then later that day, he called again. So I picked up the phone the second time he called on Sunday. And it was very clear that this was something that was bothering him. And I have, a reputation that I want to keep as far as, being alert or being accommodating, I guess is a better way of phrasing it, or being understanding. This was a concern of his that they were going to have a showing, the light was going to be off, and somehow someone was going to say they weren't going to buy the house because of this light situation. I don't necessarily agree with that, but, to each their own. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion when it comes to something like that. That said, he asked if there was any way that I could come out right away to fix it. The problem is that for the week, I had time on Tuesday, but most of the other days I had stuff already scheduled. So what I ended up saying was I could come over tomorrow, which would have been Memorial Day. So I ended up going over there on Memorial Day, taking care of it. I ended up having I just went the route of scraping all of the old stuff off and then putting it on. Now, again, I didn't charge for the original time, so technically I could have charged, but this is a customer I've done a bunch of work at. If you remember way back, one of the very beginning episodes of This Week in the Field, we did a deck railing. We replaced the entire deck railing. That was his project. And he was very understanding that it was going to cost more because of the condition of the railings themselves. And on top of that, he also referred me to one of his neighbors recently as well. So if it was not me as an owner-operator, I probably would have had to charge for that because I didn't charge for the light, the original thing. However, you have the ability to be flexible. Sometimes, as I'm told by my wife, I'm a little too flexible when it comes to stuff with the business, but that's just because I ultimately want people to have a good relationship with my business, but also just as a good member of, humankind and society and things like that. Sometimes you just help people. You can't do it too much though, because if you do it too much, then you get a reputation of just doing stuff that's, free or doing stuff that you don't charge for, and I don't want that situation. So that I basically went over there. It was very brief, but it was warranty work, so I didn't have any money come in for that. On Tuesday, I did not actually have anything scheduled. I could have thrown something in there, but the thing is, I really needed an admin day to get caught up. There's a couple different things that needed to happen. One, I needed to finish getting Gusto and Connect Team set with what I need them to have in order for the new guys that are coming on board this coming week. That's all set. I need to get in a couple of jobs and schedule them so that way it's on their schedule, because now I have to plan a little bit further out because I've got these guys. If I don't need them, they could just be sitting at home. And if they want to go do something else, that would be the time for them to plan. So I got to be more mindful of making that schedule. It's different, obviously, if they're full-time and you're just paying them 8 hours every single day and they're just having to show up where you got to go. But that's not the case in this situation. There are days that they're not going to be working with me. So there's that. I also had to get through the bookkeeping app through my CRM. That was just still not completely set up. I needed to go through and actually get the things correctly categorized so that I could go back and say, I've done everything I need to do. You guys need to do these things to get this to work. So basically with all of that, I got that stuff set. Got some stuff. I did get some estimates out as well from some of the stuff that I previously had the other week, and was able to return a lot of phone calls and take care of it. There was another thing where I had to deal with the Department of Revenue for the state of Illinois. They had my business classification incorrect on their website, so I had to get that adjusted so that I could in turn do this. Or to get Gusto set up with the payroll stuff. Still hoping that everything goes smoothly with that, because I don't want to have an issue where I'm doing something incorrectly. So that was mostly an admin day. Every once in a while, you have to have one of those. It's important to get caught up on stuff, especially if you start getting behind. I'm hoping that once I get to some of these bigger jobs where I've got these guys working, I can just take this tablet that I bought that I barely ever use, have it in the truck, and be able to take care of some stuff, return phone calls, work on estimates in the truck while they're doing work, and I can just get the other stuff done that I need to get done, so that way I have more time when I get home to not have to worry about work stuff. So that was that. Wednesday, I had my tip meeting in the morning. A couple of new referrals came in from that, as far as like people looking for things. One of which I ended up doing 2 days ago, or 2 days after that, or I guess it was the next day. But right after that, I had to run to an estimate. This is an existing customer from last year that I did some deck repair for. I replaced a bunch of railings for his deck last year. I spent a good chunk of time on that repair, but it turned out very well. He ended up painting. I wish I took a picture of after he stained it, but because it wasn't stained immediately afterwards. He stained it, I think, this spring. But it looks really good. It's probably one of the better like railings I've done. There was just a lot involved with it, but it looked really, really good. But yeah, so anyway, so his new project that he has is he has a screened-in porch. He wants the screens taken out and rescreened, and a lot of the trim pieces are currently gray, painted gray, just typical pine that's painted gray. With exterior paint. He wants to have Trex installed where all these trim pieces are. He also has lattice that it has been painted as well. And he wants to try to either get away from the lattice or stick with something that's gray. But the whole idea is that it has to have something where it can protect the screen from being able to be broken or something shoot up at if you're weed whipping in that area or something. So that estimate is going to take a little bit of time because I have to source the gray Trex. There's a couple of locations that I know I can order it from, but I have to figure out the pricing on that before I send that out. But he's not in any rush. Chances are that project's not going to even happen until July, probably August. At this point, some of the bigger projects I'm booking into July just because of how many I have right now. And I don't want people to not, people that have already approved stuff a month ago still have things that are going to happen in June. So the bigger projects are probably going to start being booked in July. That job obviously has got materials involved that I'll need to make sure that I can get as well. So that's relatively, I'd say maybe a day, maybe two with at least one or two of the helpers. So there's that. After that, I got contacted by another existing customer who was having an issue. So this was a while ago. And when I say a while ago, I mean I went back on my records and I don't even have the specific record of this job, which means it's over 3 years old. Because this job, the current CRM that I have, I've been using since I think 2024. So it's been about 2 years. And yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 2024. So the thing is, it's before March of 2024. She had a garbage disposal in her double sink. She wanted the disposal removed because she never used it. So I removed it, capped off all the electrical, had to adjust the plumbing pipes underneath. It's been a while. Okay, so like I said, it's been at least 2 years since I did this. She had an issue last year where the P-trap at the bottom just slid down. It's like there's too much pressure. Either there's too much pressure or too much weight. Obviously, it's not the weight, it's the pressure. Something is pushing the P-trap down. So the rubber washer that's on there that holds it when you tighten up the nut on there, there's enough pressure where it's pulling it down. So her message was that the P-trap had fallen underneath and she has temporarily propped it up to get it to work. So the issue was with this was that there was ABS pipes coming out of the wall. I'm not messing with any of that stuff. And it was going in such a weird direction because they had it specifically angled for the garbage disposal. I just was matching up the sink drain to the ABS pipe as best as I could. And ultimately, I think, well, at least the solution that I came up with was I just needed to extend the wall pipe for the P-trap out so that maybe it would have less pressure. I don't know for sure. I honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't even think I have a picture to show you to, have you guys take a look at it and see if there's something you see that is incorrect. But the problem is that the pipe keeps falling, and that's not something that, and when I say keeps falling, it's not keeps falling. It falls like once a year. And I'm convinced it could be something as simple as she put something underneath the sink and that there's just too much weight and the pressure from the pipes that is pulling it down. Of course, the problem is that because I'm known as the person who will make sure that you're taken care of, 2 years after the fact, I'm still going back and taking care of this, and I'm not charging anything. Now, she did offer to pay. She asked me what she owed me, and I did say I didn't want anything, and that was mostly because maybe this was something that I messed up where I should have just had a longer wall pipe in the first place. I ended up trying to go to the store to get a longer wall pipe. There wasn't a Home Depot very close, and I was on a very tight timeline. So I went to Ace Hardware. I was able just to get an extension pipe that you typically use for a tailpipe, just to give it a little bit extra length. I'm sure it'll work for now, but the other issue is that when I took the P-trap off, there was a ton of grease built up inside the P-trap. And that's another thing that you're not supposed to be doing. So that's going to add weight as time progresses to that pipe. Ultimately, if this happens again in a year, she's going to have to get a plumber out to redo the plumbing, the ABS pipes that are coming out of the wall, because I can't do anything about that. And if they start from the wall and do it to where the drains are now, they don't have to worry about the garbage disposal or these special angles that they did before. So that was that. Now, on the plus side, so this is a building that has a bunch of condos. She lives right next door to her mother. Her mother's another longtime customer that I've done countless different things. One of my best custom projects ever, which was this custom headboard that I did years ago. She tells me every time she sees me, she tells me how she always gets compliments on this headboard. It wasn't anything like super complicated, but it does look extremely custom because what I did was I combined some pieces online with some custom woodwork and painting, and it looks really good. If I can find a picture, we'll plug it up here, but I don't know if I actually have a picture readily available. But at the time, this was like the first real custom thing that I did outside of this bench thing that I made a while ago that, to be honest, I probably had no business having anything to do with. But when I look back about how much I spent for that bench or how much I charged for that bench, they got an amazing deal for what I did. Anyway, long story short, her mom knew that I was going to be over at her daughter's house and or her condo, and said, "Can you just stop by? I just need to ask you something real quick." So normally it's just like she's trying to get an idea on how much something costs. So it turns out she wants the majority of her entire condo painted. Her living room, dining room, kitchen, hallway, foyer, all painted. The bedrooms are the only thing that's not getting painted. So she wanted to get a quote based off of that. Now, it would be straightforward, and it's not that big of a space. There's a lot of cutting in just because of how everything flows. But the issue is that she has an insane amount of furniture. There's large couches, there's china cabinets, there's just a lot of furniture in general. And because there's so much furniture, the issue becomes we have to move all the furniture just to be able to get to the walls and then move it all back because she can't do that herself. That's where the added expense is. So I gave her a rough estimate of like $3,000 to $4,000, including the paint. In my mind, that seems high, but I just keep thinking about how it could take an entire day by itself to move all this furniture out of the way. Or because it's such a small unit, we were going to have to move all the stuff out of one area and then have to move it all back before we can even start in the next area because there's just not space to like move it all to the center of the room. So she wasn't dissuaded by that. She actually thought that was a good price, which made me question what other people are charging. She said that there was a painter who painted some of the other units, and she had a conversation with him, and his price was, she knew, even though she didn't say what it was, she said she knew that he was more expensive. And I'm guessing it's because her neighbors told her how much they charged, or how much this guy charged. And all I kept thinking is, what was he charging? I mean, it's not that big of a space. Like, to put in perspective, it's like the equivalence of probably like 3 or 4 bedrooms. We're not doing doors. We're not doing trim. It's just walls. $3,000-$4,000 is a lot, but I mean, like I said, it's because I have to move all this furniture, and some of it's on carpet. Then she also brought up that down the line she wants to get rid of the carpet and do some other type of flooring. That's not this year though. She typically has like one larger project every year, as long as nothing happens. Last year she didn't have a bigger project. She broke her ankle, I think. She did something with one of her legs. I can't remember what it was, but she broke. And the only time I was actually over there was to install some grab bars in her shower. Anyway, that being said, so that was another estimate, but that work isn't going to happen for a while. She said at the earliest August, potentially as late as October, because she's going to be out of town. You know, she's out of town for large chunks of time with her family. So, but that's that. So after that, then I had to go to a job that I quoted a couple weeks ago. The job was replace a bifold door and do some caulking around the countertop and window in the kitchen. This is all interior. So granite countertop, tile backsplash. It's older the tiles like that rougher ceramic stuff with the rough sanded grout. And the way they installed it, they have grout going directly up to the wood trim, and they had grout going directly up to the countertop. And then they caulked everything, but they caulked it with a clear, the countertop was caulked with a clear silicone, but as soon as the grout started cracking, you could see cracks. So you basically have to get it so that you don't have that. Get out the extra grout that's not going, that you don't see the shifts or the cracks when it shifts, and then reapply clear caulk, and then use colored caulk for the areas of the grout that has already been, like the corner shouldn't have been grout. Where the grout meets the top of the cabinets didn't need to be grout. So that was basically pretty straightforward. This customer, she also has a bunch of other projects going on. She just had to have her patio rebuilt. She had patio stones. So she had some other stuff that she was talking about doing, but down the line. So I'm sure I'll get more work from her in the future. She was very happy with my work. She was a referral from another customer. Actually, it was the customer from a while ago that we did all of the doors, the interior doors in his basement. That was a referral from him. So that job was $630. That included, like I said, the door. The door was pretty straightforward, just taking it out. The only thing that was slightly different was that we had to trim the bottom of the door so that it would clear the carpet, and we had to move the top track back because for whatever reason the way it was previously installed was at a weird angle, which probably added to the issue of the door not closing. So that was $630. Thursday we had a job where we had a drywall patch. I should say drywall patching. There was one small patch, and then there was a bunch of holes to prep for a painter that she's having come in. And then there was going to be a light for a stairwell, just a dome light replace. And then there was 2 vanity lights in the master bathroom. The light in the hallway, straightforward. It just went from a boob light to, the newer just circle lights. And then the drywall went pretty smoothly. Luckily, I've been having, sometimes I have issues with the stuff drying, especially. I always use Easy 5 for patches because I don't want to have to be there too long if I don't have to be. So I did the drywall so that it could dry, and then immediately jumped over to the light, and then did the light, came back, sanded down the drywall, checked it to make sure it was good. There was some spots on the bigger patch that were still a little bit wet. But then after that, went to do the vanity lights. The vanity lights ran into a problem. It turns out The vanity light is a bar. And the reason it was a bar was because the electrical box is not centered on the faucet. So the lights that she had, unfortunately, were not going to work because the new one that she had just has the little circle mount rather than the bar. So unfortunately, I couldn't do that, but I was on site to obviously take care of the other stuff. So I wrapped up the other stuff and then said to her, what do you want? Is there anything you want to work on in the future? Told her about the lights. I took the cost of those 2 lights off the invoice. She is still waiting for a painter to come out, which is crazy because when I think about this, I went out there, estimated the work, and then came back and did the work, and she's still waiting on this painter to come and give her an estimate. I guess in some ways, maybe I probably should have suggested we paint it, but I guess I didn't think about that. Mostly because I just assumed she was just stuck on the painter because she talked about them as if she knew who they were. But anyway, so that job was $380. For some reason, she gave me a $57 tip. It's such a very strange number. I don't know if it's because she was trying to account for the processing fee or what. That's a very oddly specific amount. And my processing fee is not obviously that high. So maybe it was a processing fee of like $7 and then $50 tip. I don't know. Either way, that's a great tip. And I don't expect tips in any way, but when they happen, it's kind of like, oh, thanks, I appreciate it. I'd be completely content if they just left a Google review after we were done. So then after that, I immediately went over to the next job, which was a member of the LaTip chapter had a mailbox that needed to be taken out. It was one where he installed it with the stake, the one where you nail it down and the post is mounted into it. It completely fell apart. You could see it here. It was not in great shape. The new mailbox, we had to move the hole back. He did say that, I specifically asked this because I knew that this could be a problem, which is, I said, do you want the box? Is it okay if the box goes in a slightly different spot if there's too much concrete? And he said, no, there's no concrete. It's just in the dirt. It was not. There was a massive mound of concrete down there. Luckily, the new mailbox was bigger, so it needed to be the post needed to be set back a little bit further, so it turned out pretty well. Cemented that in. That was set. So that job was $350. And that was Thursday. And then I had my business coaching session, which they were dealing with marketing. There was some very useful stuff I got out of that. Some things that I probably need to do a lot better on, which is figuring out ways of implementing social media into the business to promote the business. I don't personally like it, but I know that if I want to have, a higher rating when it comes to different things like AI suggestions, Google, stuff like that, they're combing for that, trust stuff that comes from you posting actual content, showing what you do. So I have to get better about that. Friday, first off, we started with an estimate here immediately in my town. This was a referral from somebody from LaTip. It was the person is a customer of one of the other LaTip members, and she didn't have a ton of stuff. It was more of like a small little variety of different things. There was some caulking. There was a hanging of a picture. It was very minor things, but you could tell that it was just things that she just couldn't take care of herself. She was a very nice woman. The only thing is she has a very tight window that stuff needs to be done because she's having a retirement party in like 2 weeks. So it just needs to get quoted, approved, and completed within that 2 weeks, which is entirely possible. It's probably honestly, maybe 2 hours worth of work. It's not very extensive stuff. Then after that, we went to another estimate. That estimate is another existing customer, a little bit further out from where I'm at. She had 2 things that she wanted me to take a look at. The first one was she had 2 sets of glass block windows that she noticed that the paint is bubbling on the inside, which means obviously there's moisture getting in. Unfortunately, I can't do anything with it. It's more tuck pointing and dealing with the mortar between that stuff, and especially around. I took some pictures of what it looked like, but it's not something I do. I don't do anything with tuck pointing. So I took a look at that and told her I would give her the name of somebody who I did have used in the past for tuck pointing, but I don't know if they come out that far. And then the other thing was she wants to basically do like a mini refresh on her bathroom, basically swap out the vanity, swap out the sink top, swap out the vanity light, replace the baseboards, and that's pretty much it. I mean, it's very straightforward. The faucet that she has is relatively new. I'm sure it'll probably be fine to reuse, but she wants something very simple for the faucet. So even if we have to replace the faucet, it's not going to be a big deal. But the faucet's built into the price regardless of whether you have the same one or not, because I have to uninstall the faucet and I have to reinstall the faucet. So that cost doesn't change if you get a new faucet or you keep the old one. It doesn't matter. The reason she specifically wanted me to come out was she was concerned about the height of the vanity and how high it needed to be. So she wanted me to take measurements so that I could tell her exactly what it was. That said, that estimate, I told her that was a couple weeks out. I think she said that they were going to be out of town in July, so it's just a matter of, maybe it was the end of June. Either way, there was no immediate rush. She just wants to do the work. So it's just a matter of me getting the estimate to her getting the stuff that she wants to pick out as far as the light or the vanity, and then getting it done. That's a 1-day project. After that, we went back to the doctor's place that has the junk that he's removing. So this time around, he had a loft upstairs that has built-in bookshelves. So we were going through all the books. My truck was almost completely filled with just books, and I didn't have a bunch of boxes for the books. So there was just, it looked like a loader loaded, just dropped in a bunch of books. I did not have it that way when I left, but because I was shifting, driving on the expressway, it kind of shifted all over the place. So with that junk removal, that wraps up his portion right now. There was some other work that he needs to have done in the future, and I know he'll contact me as soon as that needs to happen. He did want something taken care of at another property, but there's a family situation that's happening right now where he just wants to put that stuff on hold until the family stuff gets resolved in one way or the other. So that was 7/20. Saturday, I was not planning on working, but again, it just keeps happening. I got contacted by a member from a different LitTip chapter who was referred to me by a member of mine. She is moving offices. She's an accountant. She's moving from one office to another office. She needed some stuff moved from one to the other, and then some of the other items need to get moved to her home, which was like 10 minutes away. So my son went with me for this, mostly because I wasn't sure if there was going to be anything that was going to be super heavy that would require 2 people. But also, he's not opposed to making some easy, quick money. So we went and took care of that. That entire project only was about an hour, and the invoice on that one was $200. After that, we had a warranty thing for... This is kind of a frustrating one because, again, this has nothing to do with me. And I feel like a lot of these warranty things are things that, like, as I look back and say them out loud, I'm like, I probably need to start thinking about how I'm taking care of these warranty things, because nothing's happening in my favor. The customer's getting everything that they need from me as far as like information, but I'm not getting paid in any way. So last October, there was a customer. She was part of a HOA that had hired me for a bunch of other things, and she had gutter guards, the mesh ones, installed on the top of all of her gutters because she was having issues with getting her gutters are filled with pine needles from some pine trees that were very close to her property. The gutter guards apparently did not clean the gutters beforehand, and she didn't have anybody come clean the gutters before they were installed, so there was stuff built up inside the gutters underneath the gutter guards. So I came out, cleaned out the gutters with the gutter guards. I just had to uninstall them, reinstall them. It was pretty straightforward. There were some real bad spots, but most of it was not, there wasn't a lot of stuff in it. There was a lot of pine needles that were sticking out because they're mesh and they have those little holes. Pine needles can still get stuck in. So when you're down at the ground and you're looking up, you can see pine needles sticking out. So she called to say that there was a section of the gutters that were overflowing whenever there was a lot of rain. And she visually saw it, and there was a spot of erosion on the corner of the property. My immediate response was, well, those pine needles can still get in the thing. And she then said, well, I actually got those pine trees removed in February. I was like, oh, okay. But she said that there were still issues. So basically we were going there to find out if there was a clog. There was not a clog. There was like a handful. I mean, like literally like 10 pine needles that we found in that area. What I'm actually thinking there's a combination of two things. One, the downspout needs to be a much larger downspout for that area. If there's too much water coming into that one specific corner and the downspout's not big enough, it's gonna pool up. There was no clog in the downspout, and there was no clog at the top of the downspout. What I think is actually happening is because the roof has a bunch of different points of peaks and things like that, the valleys are shooting water down and it's actually hitting those gutter guards and it's deflecting off. So I ran a hose up there to redo this thought process that I had. I can only produce so much water obviously via hose, and that's not the same as a humongous rainstorm. But that's what I'm sure it is. So I'm sure it's a combination of some of the water is deflecting off, and the other part is that the downspout's not big enough. The spot of erosion is directly next to where the downspout is, so it's probably right there and overflowing because it's a corner. So we just took pictures and sent them over to her and made sure that there was no clogs, and there wasn't. But again, there was no clogs, and this wasn't something that was my fault. This goes back to the gutter guards. The gutter guards, they just... the best way to put it is they probably... There's a couple different versions of gutter things in my area. One of the most expensive one is leaf guard gutters, which is a molded gutter that has a cap that goes over. Those, they always install the bigger size gutters, not the standard size that you see on almost every house. They're always oversized because the water has to have a way of like getting over the edge and getting back into the gutter. The other type is the ones that she had, which is just these mesh. They're not mesh. They're made of metal, but they have holes printed in them. It's a piece of metal that is placed on and drilled into the gutter itself. And then there's this really cheap version that I've seen before, which is, it looks like almost like a gray or black sponge. You put it in there, it basically keeps the leaves from being able to like sit in the gutter because they'll just blow off. And then what happens is the water can pass through this like spongy material. It's not actually a sponge. It's just like it's fibrous like a sponge where the water can pass through and without having to worry about anything getting stuck in the gutters. Those have a tendency to never work very well just because they work fine for what they are. Appearance-wise, they don't look great. I installed those once on a garage where the customer was renting from somebody, and the tenant or the landlord did not want to pay for gutter cleaning, so they told the tenant they were responsible for gutter cleaning. So they just decided to spend the money for these things. She was not leaving this house anytime soon. So that was that. So it was warranty work, but I didn't get anything from that. The last thing was we went back to the apartment building for the property manager. The unit that was vacant that I worked on ages ago, which might have been before we started this, that work, that unit's about to be rented, but there was a request that they could get new knobs and the tub recaulked. So it looked like absolute crap before because somebody globbed caulk all over the place. So we came in, scraped all the old caulk off, applied new caulk around the base of around the perimeter of the tub, and then the hope was to replace the trim kit because the trim kit looked bad. I could not for the life of me figure out what this trim kit was or find a replacement online. and I'm on a time crunch because this needed to be done before June 1st, which is the day that the people are moving in. And this was obviously 2 days before that. So I was trying my absolute hardest to try to figure out what it was, using AI to try to determine what type of trim kit it was. Turns out this specific type of trim kit was used in mobile homes and manufactured homes. Why in the world this valve is there from a mobile home, I do not know. But the funny thing is, so my son was with me for the entire day on Saturday. What we ended up doing was the piece of trim, figured out it was actually painted. Someone painted it twice, once with white and then once with like a gray. It wasn't even silver or anything like that. So my son scraped all the old paint off, but then obviously because we were scraping a piece of metal, it left scratch marks all over, but the piece by itself was super tarnished. That's probably why they painted it in the first place. But as he scraped all this stuff off, we were able to actually find the brand of it, and I actually was able to find a replacement online. However, we're going with the route of what I did, which was we cleaned it up, put it back in place, replaced the knob, scrubbed the heck out of the diverter spout, and then re-caulked everything with clear caulk instead of the globby white caulk that should never be touching any sort of metal, just because it doesn't look right. Appearance-wise, it's fine for a rental unit. The property manager will be completely fine with this. If they want to go the route, or the tenant says, well, this is what I was looking for, we can always go the route of getting the trim kit. It's just not cheap because it's vintage. So we're talking like $100 for a metal plate. I don't know that anybody's going to want to pay for that. In the grand scheme of things, if I was able to have gotten the trim kit before we spent all this time scraping it and cleaning all that stuff up, that would have been great. We could have just rebuilt the entire outside with the knob and stuff, but they're gonna just have added cost if they want the trim kit installed. So that said, that was $240 for that. So that brings our weekly total to $2,577. Obviously down from the week before, but there was a lot more estimates, and there's a lot of jobs that are coming up that are going to be adding a lot more money to the bank. But things we've got coming up, we've got our part-time helpers starting on Monday. We don't have any work scheduled that day. We're doing orientation. Some of them have not worked with a lot of tools, so we're going to be talking about the names of tools. So if I say, go grab this, they have a general idea of what it is, or at least, hey, where it is, and the kind of like where everything is located in my truck and things like that. Speaking of which, if you haven't checked it out, 2 weeks ago we released a video about one of the other toolboxes that I keep in my truck with all the tools that I don't use on a daily basis, but I always have with me. So check that out. I know that the first video I did of my original toolbox, the ones of the stuff that I use every day, that one was pretty popular. So check out the other toolbox. In a couple weeks, I'm going to do a video of everything else that's in the truck, stuff that I always will have with me. That's not just the toolboxes. I do have some other stuff. Supplies is really what we're going to be delving into with that video. So in addition to that, last week's Handyman in the Field video dealt with jobs that will actually make you money. It's the jobs that make the most sense to be making good money and being able to like stack them and make good money in a day. So definitely check that out as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate all of the subscribers that have come on board recently. I appreciate everybody who's finding the videos. Please like, subscribe. If you leave a comment, I'm doing my best to try to take the comments that warrant a response, and I'm going to be doing video responses. So if you've got something in depth that you want to know about, leave a comment below, and I will answer those in short form. And figure out how to do that, because at this point I haven't done one. Every comment that I've gotten is something I can just respond to with text. It's not something that I can delve more in depth to. So, and if there's anything else you guys want to know, if there's something more specific or something you don't think is needed in some of these videos, please let me know. I appreciate it. As I'm finishing up this video, I'm realizing that the light that I typically have that gives me more light has not been on. That happens a lot. So if you've ever noticed that there's sometimes it's very bright and sometimes it's not, it's because I forget to turn that light on beforehand. But again, another little bit behind the scenes thing. So with all that being said, I appreciate you guys for watching. I appreciate you guys, sharing the video if you are interested in that. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate everybody who's watching the videos. With all of that being said, this has been the latest This Week in the Field with the Handyman in the Field. We'll see you guys next time.